and burn.
Hey everyone! So tonight I wanted to discuss the 2010 film My Joy. Now, this film is from Russia, and I understand that when it was initially released, it was met with some controversy because a lot of people from the other side of the pond, they felt that this movie was sort of Russia-phobic, I suppose. And whereas I don't know much about Russia, it always seems like whenever I'm watching a film from Russia, they always go like this. It's showing that like the Russian lifestyle is one that it's very bleak and it's very hard and it's very depressing, and that maybe is Russia-phobic, I suppose. I don't really know. I don't know any Russians. I don't know anybody who's ever been to Russia. But every Russian film I've ever watched suggests that country is rough. And of course, My Joy, aptly titled, is certainly no exception. Tells the story of Yorgi. He's a truck driver delivering whatever he needs to from A to B, and that's his job. It's what he does for a living. And you know, right from the jump, this movie isn't starting off great. The tone of this movie, despite the things that happen, I will say that the tone wasn't the heaviest, and I think that's what made this movie more palatable. Was had the tone matched sort of the things that unfold throughout the course of this film, I think this would have been a lot harder to watch. But I found the tone to be so even and so clean that I was able to just sort of accept the badness that happens with a lot more grace. But anyways, the movie starts off with Yorgi goes home, and I'm assuming that's his wife. She pretends to be asleep. He comes into his apartment and he just kind of leaves her some money, and then he goes. And of course, at this point, I didn't really think much of that, but considering what transpires later, I realized that he never gets to go home again. So, despite the fact that his home life might have been sort of unsatisfying, and him and his significant other, weren't seeing eye to eye and weren't loving their situation together anymore, he never gets to go home again, and that really bothered me. So what happens is this movie is just essentially a few days, or at least initially, it's just a few days on the road as he's driving from A to B. The one thing about this movie is that it jumps timelines from time to time. So if like you happen to leave the room, make sure you pause this, because I made the mistake of not pausing this when I left the room for like barely 30 seconds. When there's this old guy that he picks up, and the old guy started telling this story about when he was younger during World War II, and that's when I exited the room. When I came back in, like I said, barely half a minute later, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I didn't know who any of the characters were, so I had to rewind it, and I found out that it jumps timelines back to World War II, where the soldier the old man discusses what it was like when he was a soldier, and how there was this corrupt officer who was going to take all his shit, and he ended up having to kill him. And and then it jumps back again to the current time when Yorgi he picks up a really young prostitute, and he's driving her from A to B, and he tries to give her some money so that she doesn't have to prostitute herself, but she takes great offense to this and says that she's going to earn her own money, and then slaps her crotch and says, "With this," and she walks off, and we never see her again. And I like this part when she leaves. There's a part in like this sort of village, little town place. I liked how the camera would sort of trail off, and it would follow these random people for no reason. Like right after Yorgi has that little encounter, the standoff sort of with the young prostitute, this dude pushes past him. And I thought that was gonna, to be the next development in this story. And the dude pushes right through him, and he pushes through a few other people in this crowded sort of like town square type place where they are. And then the camera starts following this dude, and I'm like, okay, so naturally this guy's gonna have something to do. No, he doesn't. He just walks off, and then the camera starts to follow this old woman walking through part of a graveyard, and she has nothing to do with the narrative of the film. She's just there as well. And I really liked that. I liked how the camera branched off and just sort of showed these random people. There's so much going on in this movie. So, long story short, Yorgi hooks up with these couple dudes who talk him into hanging out with them for a while. And the only reason they do that is because they want to knock him out and steal his shit from his truck, whatever it is that he's transporting. So they clunk him over the head, and then they're really disappointed to find out that the truck is just filled with flour. So they leave everything, and they're like, oh man, we bothered that guy for nothing. And I'm like, bothered him? Did a little more than fucking bother him. And boy, did they ever. Because when Yorgi comes around, he's no longer the same dude that he was. The blow to the head that he took has left him with some form of considerable brain damage. Because for the rest of the film, he just sort of, he's a mute. He goes mute. And he just sort of wanders around with a sort of like lost look in his eyes, like he's kind of like in his mouth, so he's half open, like you know he's not all there. And he ends up, this woman takes him in and ends up using him as a sex slave. Oh, Russian movies. And she ends up stealing his truck, of course, which she sells. And Yorgi just kind of ends up wandering from place to place. He gets his ass kicked by some townspeople wherever he is. And at this point, several months have passed because at this point it's winter. So again, like I said at the start of this, he never gets to go home again. And that really bothered me. And his wife, I mean, she didn't seem happy, but you know she's going to be at least somewhat concerned because it's been months now and Yorgi, he hasn't come back. And it jumps back to World War II and it shows these two Russian soldiers, staking out this German guy's house in Russia, and they end up killing him and taking a bunch of his shit and leaving his son to fend for himself. And that house is a sort of pivotal. It's sort of really important as far as this film is concerned because that's the house where the old man from the start of the movie that Yorgi gave the ride to, he's living in near the end of the film when he ends up taking Yorgi in when he finds him on the side of the road and he recognizes him and he says, oh fuck man, dude, you're gonna freeze to death. And he's like, I'll give you a hand, you know. And so what happens is these two Russian soldiers, one of them suffering from some advanced form of PTSD because he's seeing like people hanging that aren't there, and he's sort of like low key losing his mind. It's not directly implied, but that Russian soldier may have been responsible for axing the old dude to death in the German guy's house from World War II. And Yorgi comes out all sort of mute and sort of like not there, and he sees the old man and he turns him over and he sees the wound and he knows he's dead. And he finds a gun on him and he takes the gun. And he just keeps wandering and wandering, and eventually he ends up getting a ride from another truck driver who talks about the importance of minding your own business. And they end up at a truck stop. It's like an official, like a government truck stop that has a couple of police officers there who have already pulled over apparently a police commandant or something, some bigwig in the police force, and they're beating the shit out of him. And they need witnesses to show that the police commandant guy, the head cop who they're beating the shit out of, he did something wrong. So they forced the truck driver and Yorgi to sort of sign these papers saying that the guy resisted arrest or whatever. And of course they can't reach Yorgi. He can't sign anything because I don't think he's capable of signing anything. And they start threatening them, and then Yorgi just pulls the gun out and fucking kills everybody, including the cop they were beating the shit out of, the two cops that were beating the shit out of the other cop, the guy's wife, the cop's wife, who the two cops were beating the shit out of. He shoots him too. He shoots the other truck driver that gave Yorgi the ride. And then he just walks off, shuffles off into the darkness. And that's how the movie ends. I really liked this movie. This is one of those movies where, like, at this point now I've watched it 3 times, and it's a good sign. If I can watch a movie 3 times, I can watch it 30 times. And this movie, there's something, I don't want to say entertaining, because this isn't that type of film, but at the same time, that word does apply, because I did find it entertaining enough to watch it now 3 times. Every time I watch it, I get something new out of it as well. So I think I'll leave it there, because this is exceptionally long. So thank you so much for hanging out with me for pushing 10 minutes while I discussed the 2010 film My Joy. If you liked this review or whatever, don't forget to do something nice for someone. And thank you so much for making it to the end of this one. It was really long. Have a good day. I just wanted to say thank you for making it through the entire video. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to remind everyone one more time, even though I've probably already done this in the video that you just watched, to please click the like button as well as the subscribe button because it helps this channel grow. And thank you for hitting like and subscribe, and we will see you guys really soon.